It has been a day and it's like 2:45. I can't even tell you what I've done today. Y'all know it's been a day when you voluntarily choose the founding father's ponytail out of all of the different hairstyles. Welcome back, everybody. If you're just joining us, took you long enough. No, I'm just kidding. Thanks for joining. I like to talk about spooky shit, so if you're watching this video, hopefully you do too. Thanks for joining us. Let's get started. Today, I want to discuss movies that were inspired by real life serial killers or true crime events. I feel like these type of films have been really popular lately, especially with all of those like Ted Bundy ones that came out at once. Like, move to the next one. I don't know why everyone was like,
he was attractive, he was so handsome.
He looks like the fourth chipmunk from Alvin and the Chipmunks.
I don't see it.
So today we're gonna discuss 5 movies that I love that were inspired by true crime events. Let's jump right in with number 1, The Strangers. The Strangers came out in 2008 and was directed by Brian Bertino. After returning from a wedding reception, a couple staying in an isolated vacation house receive a knock on the door in the mid-hours of the night. Now, when this movie first came out, a lot of people, including some pretty high-profile film critics, were not a fan. But in my humble opinion,
It's scary.
maybe it's just the type of person that I am, but I personally think home invasion movies are horrifying just because they have that aspect of realism, like it could happen right now.
But I don't know what to do in that situation.
This movie was inspired by the Manson family murders. If you didn't know or haven't really researched the background on the Manson family was a cult ran by Charles Manson that was prevalent in the 60s and the 70s. The group consisted of around 100 followers who lived an unconventional lifestyle. Many of Manson's followers were actually young women from middle-class backgrounds. Basically, Manson's followers believed that he was a reincarnation of Jesus Christ, and he manipulated them into believing that there was an oncoming race war, and he was the only one who could save them.
A white man? No!
In 1969, family members Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, and Patricia Kernwinkle entered the home of Hollywood actress Sharon Tate and murdered her along with 4 others. The home had only recently been rented by Sharon and her husband Roman Polanski, who was a famous director at the time. However, Polanski was abroad filming a movie, and the family members unfortunately murdered Sharon Tate, who was also 8.5 months pregnant, Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, and Wojtek Frykowski. The caretakers found their bodies the next morning, along with the word pig written in blood on the front door. This whole home invasion really scared everybody for a long time. So Bertino really wanted to capture that fear that everybody felt at the time of these murders and translate that over to what they felt while watching The Strangers. The second movie we're going to discuss is Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Psycho came out in 1960 and is about a Phoenix secretary that embezzles $40,000 from her employer's client. She goes on the run and then checks into a remote motel run by a young man under the domination of his mother. Without a doubt, everyone has heard of this movie, but did you know that it was inspired by Ed Gein? Psycho is considered one of Hitchcock's best films. It's long been praised as being one of the greatest films of all time. However, Hitchcock did base Psycho off of a novel that came out in 1959. This novel was by Robert Bloch, and it was also titled Psycho. This novel, of course, was inspired by the case of Ed Gein. Ed Gein was born in Plainfield, Wisconsin, which is the same town he committed his disgusting acts in as well. He murdered 2 women that we know of and that he's convicted of. However, he is suspected of many more crimes, including the death of his brother. Famously, after being arrested, the authorities searched Gein's home and found homemade trophies, keepsakes, bones, skin, other things I probably shouldn't talk about. You do the research. He did confess to the murder of 2 women tavern owner Mary Hogan in 1954, and hardware store owner Bernice Worden in 1957. Worden's decapitated body was found and strung up inside of Gein's home. Investigators also found furniture that had been made from Gein's hobby, and most famously, clothing items made from human flesh.
Oh god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god.
He was convicted and spent the rest of his life in a mental institution before he died in 1984. Both Gein and the main character of Psycho, Norman Bates, are famous for having extremely domineering mothers. Their mothers playing very important parts of their life and heavily influenced the behavior of both Bates and Gein. Damn, this dude was crazy.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
The third movie I've included on my list is one I don't really hear a lot of people talking about, but was extremely popular when it came out. This movie is Monster. Monster came out in 2003 and was directed by Patty Jenkins. The film is about serial killer Eileen Wuornos, a former street prostitute who murdered 7 of her male clients between 1989 and 1990 before she was executed in 2002. Eileen Wuornos is considered one of the heavy hitters of the serial killer world. This woman's story is crazy. Eileen Wuornos was bananas. She had an awful childhood, unfortunately. She was sexually assaulted starting from a very, very young age. After escaping an abusive household, she went to live in the woods and got by prostitution. Eileen Wuornos murdered 7 men in the state of Florida. She says that her first murder was actually in self-defense. She was trying to protect herself from not getting assaulted by a truck driver. This then led to the murder of 6 other men. So don't really think she learned anything from that first time.
You calling me a liar? I ain't calling you a truther.
She was sentenced to death for 6 of these murders and died by lethal injection on October 9th in 2002. Eileen was portrayed by Charlize Theron in Monster, and talk about a total 180, man. She really embodied this role to an extreme, and it really paid off. Her performance is fantastic. The director of this film actually made contact with Eileen before her execution, and they communicated through all of these letters with Eileen telling her the truth. And she famously was a pretty closed off person. She, knew everyone thought she was crazy, so she didn't really try. However, she formed a bond with Patty Jenkins, and they were able to base Charlize's performance off of the information that Eileen provided them in these letters. And I feel like that's so rare, and also was extremely important in nailing the accuracy of this film. Eileen's last words before her lethal injection in 2002 were, "Yes, I would just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back, like Independence Day with Jesus. June 6th, like the movie. Big mothership and all, I'll be back." All right, we've gotten to number 4, and that is my personal favorite on this whole entire list. We're gonna talk about Zodiac by David Fincher. This movie came out in 2007 and is about a San Francisco cartoonist who becomes an amateur detective obsessed with tracking down the Zodiac killer, an unidentified individual who terrorizes Northern California in a killing spree. The story behind this film is one of my favorites I've ever heard. So David Fincher, who famously directed films like Fight Club, Seven, most recently Gone Girl, he became obsessed with the case, and he based his film off of a nonfiction book that came out in 1986 written by Robert Graysmith. So Fincher, James Vanderbilt, who wrote the screenplay, and the producer, Bradley C. Fisher, tried to solve the Zodiac case themselves. The Zodiac killer famously taunted the police by sending them letters, blood-stained clothing, and most famously ciphers throughout his killing spree, which some ciphers have been cracked, but a lot of them have not been. So what did Fincher do about this? He hired his own team of investigators to try and crack the case. This is the way you handle a film based on unfortunate tragedy of people being murdered, and he did it with respect. They conducted their own interviews with witnesses and former police officers, family members, friends, anyone who was close to these murders at the time, the actual murders. Fincher went in and made sure that he had the most accurate information possible when making this movie, which just blows my mind. He even interviewed 2 of the surviving victims and the mayor of San Francisco at the time. He even told Vanderbilt that he wanted the screenplay to be written using the majority of police reports from the murders at the time because he needed the information to be accurate. Now, if you've seen this movie, you know it has an extremely long runtime of 2 hours and 37 minutes. But it doesn't feel like that at all. The Zodiac murdered 5 known victims in the San Francisco Bay Area between December of 1968 and October of 1969. He mainly targeted couples, which is a very interesting MO. In these letters, the Zodiac killer himself claims to have at least 37 victims, some being linked to other cold cases and some other ones being linked to different states. However, to this day, nobody knows who the Zodiac killer is.
Psych!
The last film we're going to talk about today is the Amityville.
You stupid!
The last film we're going to talk about today is the Amityville Horror.
Yeah, I got that right.
The Amityville Horror came out in 1979 and was directed by Stuart Rosenberg. Newlyweds and their 3 children move into a large house where a mass murder was committed. They start to experience strange, inexplainable manifestations which have strong effects on everyone living under the roof. There is another movie that came out in 2005 that stars Ryan Reynolds, however, we're going to be focusing on the 79 version. The film is actually based on a book by Jay Anson that came out in 1977. And this book focused around experiences that the Lutz family had when they moved in after a mass murder had taken place in the home a year before. On the morning of November 13th in 1974, 6 members of the DeFeo family were found shot to death in their beds. 23-year-old Robert DeFeo was the only surviving member of the family, running down to the bar yelling for help when he supposedly found his dead family member. These family members included parents Luis and Ronald DeFeo Sr., his siblings 18-year-old Dawn, 13-year-old Allison, 12-year-old Mark, and 9-year-old John Matthew. This case is really strange. Reportedly, Ronald Jr. had a volatile relationship with his father. His father was said to be an abusive man who really just didn't. Ronald Jr. tried to blame these murders actually on the mob. Apparently, his father had mob ties and thought he could just blame it on a hitman. However, that hitman had an alibi that night. Everyone quickly suspected Ronald Jr. was at the core of these murders. Of course, his legal team tried to play it off as Ronald having schizophrenia. However, it was determined he was fit to stand trial and he was convicted of these murders. Some things are strange about these, one of those being 6 people were murdered. The rifle that he used did not have a silencer on it, and the rooms were kind of sporadically placed throughout the house. So you would hear the gunshots. However, it looked like none of the family members had tried to run. They were just kind of laying there, and the neighbors reported hearing nothing from the home. The only sound they heard was the dog barking. The defense tried to write this off as they were drugged. However, the coroner did a full autopsy and there were no drugs in any of their systems. So that's where the supernatural part comes to play.
Demon?
Stop calling it that.
Demon!
Stop it. Stop talking to it.
No, I just want to talk to the demons.
Some people do believe that Ronald was possessed to carry out these murders. However, it was well known that Ronald Sr. had quite a large life insurance policy, so unfortunately, he probably was murdered due to this. A year after these murders, the Lutz family moved in, and this is a true story. They moved in and claimed to have paranormal experiences happen in the home. However, they did try to capitalize off of this immediately, approaching a bunch of different people with book ideas, and they even admitted one time when they were drunk that they just made it all up. However, their sons claim to this day that they have had paranormal experiences. So I guess we really can't be sure. In the end, these are all extremely tragic things that happen to real life people. Of course, we enjoy these films. However, we do need to remember that Hollywood capitalizes off of people's murders, and real people still struggle through the pain of losing their friends and family members. Thanks for watching, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you liked any of the cases, I'd be happy to go a little bit in depth on them. I think a lot of them are really interesting. Please check out any of these movies. They are fantastic. They do a great job being respectful of the source material, and they're made by directors who really cared about it, and it really shows. Until next time, my friends, stay creepy.